Welcome to the Endurance Studio podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Turner. I'm an avid ultra-endurance cyclist, bikepacker, and runner, and I'm on a journey to learn and share everything I can about how people can push beyond their limits. This podcast will explore all aspects of endurance through conversations with people I find unique and interesting. There's always an amazing story of accomplishment and failure, and always something to learn. I run this podcast from an off-grid mobile studio I've created so I can travel to the guests and have authentic, in-person conversations because I believe in the importance and power of face-to-face conversations. Thank you for watching and listening. This episode is brought to you by Squirrel's Nut Butter. Who doesn't need a little extra lube in their life? They make adventure lube. It's the best in the business. I use the saddle butter for riding and the anti-chafe for ultra running. It's all natural ingredients, sustainable packaging, and it's locally manufactured here in Flagstaff, Arizona. And go check out episode number 4 with Chris Thornley. He's the owner and operator of Squirrel's Nut Butter. He's an amazing human, and he's got some really great stories on that podcast. So check him out. You can use my unique promo code, Endurance15, for 15% off any of their products online at squirrelsnutbutter.com, or you can click the link in the description and it will automatically be applied to your shopping cart. So please use that code. Go buy from them. Let them know that their support of this podcast is paying off for them, and spread that lube love. squirrelsnutbutter.com. This episode is brought to you by Embark Good Energy. If y'all have been following me for a while, you'll know that I have a thing for maple syrup, and I'm stoked to announce that I am now an ambassador for Embark Good Energy. They hail from the woods of Wisconsin's driftless region, and they make amazing organic maple syrup. So I love adding this, what I call rocket fuel, into my bikepacking race mix. There's 3 flavors: salted maple energy, coffee maple energy with 72 milligrams of green tea caffeine, that's my favorite, and elderberry, which can be taken straight up or mixed with water. One 3 fluid ounce pouch has a lab verified 320 calories and 80 grams of carbs. And it's not that garbage maple syrup with high fructose corn syrup. This is 100% organic, great tasting maple syrup. You can use directly from the pack for quick energy, mix it with water for a hydration aid, or use it in camp cooking and even cocktail mixes. They're convenient resealable pouches, so you can have multiple uses while consuming it and avoid sticky messes. So use my unique promo code to get 20% off today. The code is EMBARK20, EMBARK20, for any products online at embarkmaple.com. I want to give a huge thanks to the generous super thanks from Greg Dunham. Thank you, Greg. And shout out to the newest members of the YouTube page, David Failing and Casey Bredesen. Thank you so much for continuing to support as members. You've probably heard this term. People say endurance sports are mostly mental, right? Well, today's guest has spent her life studying and coaching the mental and psychological aspects of endurance sports, and she has become an expert in that arena. She is a sports performance psychologist and has her master's degree in applied positive psychology. I'm grateful to have the opportunity today to sit down with Shannon Thompson. I print all these notes, and then I usually never look at them.
Yeah, when I do presentations, it's like that too. I carry them around because I can't be without it. It's like the security blanket, but basically don't look at it.
Yeah. For me, it's totally it's the process of researching and understanding, your side of things. And so, and like I said, I did listen to a couple of your podcasts you did before. And the listeners here a lot of them are ultra runners, I think, but the majority of them are probably ultra bike packers.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that sport?
Not really.
Okay. So, for example, I just completed the Colorado Trail Race.
Okay.
So that's, 525 miles from Denver to Durango.
Cool. Yeah.
It's self-supported, so it kind of differs from ultra endurance supported running.
Yeah.
Like foot races.
Yeah.
Where you are not allowed to have any support crew or contact with support. It's trying to keep it as fair as possible for people that are coming in from other countries and other towns and stuff.
Yep.
And so you basically can like buy hotel. You can get a hotel. You have to carry all your stuff. So if you're going to camp out, you got to like carry all your gear and your bivy and your sleeping bag and everything. And buy all your food and carry all your food the entire way. So
you can't go to a restaurant partway through.
Yeah, you can.
You can.
Yeah,
okay.
You can buy commercially available services.
Okay, I see. It's whatever like the internationals can do, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, and the point of that, I mean, the rules are kind of weird, and these are all kind of like underground races that have come kind of out of nothing, and they're not permitted and they're not official. They're all like underground sort of things, unregulated somewhat.
Yeah.
But there is like a weird ego rule set that happens where everybody is very serious about the rule set for each race. And so so I think most of my listeners here kind of, that was what I first got into, so they kind of grew out of that. But you know, can you tell us a little bit about your background, equestrian history, and kind of give the listeners here a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So exactly. As you have done your research, my background is in equestrian sport, primarily an equestrian sport called 3-day eventing, which is kind of like a horse triathlon. So the first day is kind of like, the first day is dressage, whereas each competitor follows like rides the same pattern and gets judged on it.
Okay.
The second day is cross country. So that's where you gallop around really fast up and down natural terrain over solid obstacles. So could be like jumps made out of big logs, could be in and out. It's always like in and out of water, over ditches, stuff like that. So much more rugged and risky, I guess you could say. Yeah. And then the third day is show jumping. So you come back and you jump around over those colored poles some people have probably seen on television. Yeah. The idea is to not knock them down, and then the combined score is the whoever has the least penalties at the end is the winner. So yeah, my background is in that, and I did equestrian sport from the time I was 5 till I was 30. I didn't go to college till I was 30. Okay. And then I did that in a big hurry because I had all my friends were doctors and lawyers and I didn't feel like a real adult. So I was like, I need to be a real adult. And but one of the things that's good about, I think, an advantage of delaying your, post high school education is you really know what you want to do by the time you get that far. Sure. So I knew for about 3 years, like in the last sort of 3 years of my equestrian career, that I knew that when it ended, I wanted to move on and study sports psychology, essentially. And yeah, so when it did wrap up, or when that transition became kind of natural and obvious, I went on. I actually studied do you want me to go as far as like follow that whole path at this point? Okay,
please do.
Okay,
yeah.
So I did a master's I did a bachelor's in psychology about as fast as I could. And then
you're from Canada.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
Did you do your school in Canada or US?
I did my bachelor's in psychology. I did it through a small college in British Columbia called Thompson Rivers University. And then I went from there to the University of Pennsylvania and did my master's in applied positive psychology. So quite like the dichotomy, like the smallest little school you could ever want to go to for the bachelor's, and then a school that has more prestige. Although I didn't even know what an Ivy League school was we don't really that's not such a big deal in Canada. So I didn't even know when I went there even what that was. But I did a master's in applied positive psychology, and then in the same time period, I guess I started my master's in 2014, but in 2013, I went to the Trans Rockies Run, which you might be familiar with. Probably some of your listeners are. Sure. Like a 6-day stage race in Colorado. And I met a bunch of people from Flagstaff at that race. One of which was Rob Krar, who of course is like a well-known ultra runner, and then the other one is Mike Smith. Before he became coach at NAU, he was coach at Georgetown, so he was there. Those two were there with a group from Flagstaff, and they were really kind and embraced myself and my friend from Canada who were at this race and kind of adopted us, and we hung out all weekend long or for those 6 days. And then I just kind of felt an intuitive pull to Flagstaff. And so I stayed with Rob and his wife, Christina, that winter, and met up with Mike a few times on the East Coast when I ended up going to school there. And we just kind of all stayed in communication. And then after I graduated, after I finished my master's degree, I just had this pull to Flagstaff, and I'd been told by my new friends that I should talk to Sean Anthony, who at the time owned Hypo2 Sport here in Flagstaff. And just they were saying it's a kind of a one-stop shop for elite and local athletes. And I noticed they didn't have anybody offering mental performance services. So I asked Sean if it would be okay if I came here after school and set up and kind of came to see if I could survive, if it could be if this was viable here. And he said yes, and he did everything he could to help me. And that was 2015. And I came and kept, things just built from there. Yeah.
Beautiful. So back to the equestrian real quick. Did you watch any of the Olympics?
I watched only equestrian and track.
And did you see like the Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart commentary on the equestrian?
I've seen other goofy equestrian commentary before, but I didn't see that particular. Sounds like I'm gonna have to search it.
Yeah, it's like, it seems like the upside down world when Snoop Dogg is doing commentary for equestrian in the Olympics, right? Compared to 30 years ago when he was a gangster and we weren't allowed to listen to his music.
True. Well,
it's just the world's a very different place now.
That's actually really, you're right. So you're looking at the evolution of Snoop Dogg.
Not quite equestrian.
But I do remember, I can't remember who it was, but there was a goofy something like that, at the last Olympics, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was something, oh look, horse is moving south. No, it was there was some step, right? And they were oh, the horse is doing the whatever step.
Yeah, it was the crip walk.
The crip walk, that's it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Because, when you're immersed in a sport, it just seems natural, right? To me, it's of course everything that goes on with horses. I mean, of course, everybody knows what that is. Sure. Of course, you forget how it looks to the outside world, right?
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point, about all these endurance sports, and especially living in Flagstaff. I've found that this is kind of a mecca for elite athletes.
Yes.
In all different realms, right? With NAU.
Yep.
And all of the Olympic level athletes coming out of NAU.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe we have, I live out down across the way, and there's some, I believe it's a rental house or something, but it's just for what looks like Olympic level runners.
Totally, yeah.
Because there's always
somebody new,
really high level, Nike level sponsored,
yes,
Olympic level runners that we see in our neighborhood, and we're what is happening? So when us normies, I see myself and my wife as a normie endurance athlete.
Sure.
We're just trying to finish these things, not we're not elites in any way. We're kind of recreationalists.
Yeah.
But we're stacking ourselves up against all these incredible athletes, right?
Yeah.
And so we're at the bottom of the barrel in Flagstaff, but we go to any other town and we're considered crazy and elite.
Yes.
So we forget that sometimes, is my point.
Yes.
You kind of get acclimated to this environment here in Flagstaff.
You do.
It's lucky for us because that's what we're into. But
yeah.
So can you do what is positive psychology?
Yeah, positive psychology is the kind of basically the study of human flourishing and high achievement.
Okay.
So the little bit of back history on it is it's founded by a psychologist his name is Martin Seligman, and he was a clinical psychologist for a long time. His background was clinical psychology, and he had just a realization a little ways into his work that we invest basically all our time and resources into studying just psychological struggle, and he's we really ought to know more about what goes on in the minds of people who are actually enjoying their lives and flourishing in their lives, and you could say living their best life,
Yeah.
And so he developed this field called positive psychology. And it's funny, the name positive psychology, they have wrestled with it. I think it's probably 25 years old now or 30 years old, the field. And they still don't like the name positive psychology, because I think it just doesn't quite sum up the full scope of what it's about. Because it's really about, it spans a wide spectrum. So it spans just basic human well-being. How do we get to a place where we enjoy our day-to-day generally? It spans stuff like grit. Like grit's quite a well-known concept now in kind of our modern day, even pop psychology.
Yeah.
Flow state you would include in positive psychology. There's all sorts of creativity. There's like researchers that would call themselves within the field of positive psychology that it spans a really wide scope. So positive psychology the term doesn't quite encompass what it is entirely.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically the study of well-being and flourishing.
Yeah.
So
and you're like so charismatic and happy. Like you have like an energy about you. Just walking up here to the tent, you had like this energy. Have you always been like that? Have you always been just like?
I think I have. Yeah. I think for me to be grateful for. That's something. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's hard to keep that.
Yeah. But I don't always feel that way.
Okay.
There's certain things that come out on the surface. Right. But, oh no, man, I'm a mix of just as much storm as anyone.
Yeah.
But there's a certain amount of stuff that comes out on the surface that is, I'm glad that comes out.
Yeah.
You know, because it's genuine. But there's layers. There's as many layers in me as anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to have bad days.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like going into the Colorado Trail race. For me, you know, it was my biggest bikepacking race. I was trying to go into it calmly. I set realistic expectations for myself. I have a tendency to want to like be at the front of the pack, even though physically I'm not able to be at the front of the pack. Yep. But I feel like the high school competitiveness in me comes out in these situations. And there was one thing that I was like a mantra that I was telling myself before this, and it was like the only thing, like I don't really believe in manifestation, but I think that you can manifest positivity. Yeah, I think negativity and positivity can be manifested.
Yep.
And that's like the only thing. Like I don't believe in like, if you think hard enough about getting a job or something, you're going to end up manifesting getting it. Like you may have to take steps. It may push you into taking steps that eventually get you that goal. But like there's actions that need to be taken. It seems like the idea of positivity and negativity are things that you can easily control right in the moment with a simple action, right? And one of those things that I found was like smiling.
Yes.
Like just literally just smiling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Smiling. When you're in the depths of the darkness of the sleep deprivation and running out of food, and like you're 250 miles in and you got 250 miles to go.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't imagine. That's a space I have not been.
And I smile, right?
Yes.
Or try to like find the things that are around me that, try to be a little bit in the moment, right? And not think about the next 250 miles. Like the beauty of where I was in Colorado and on these alpine lakes with like moose hanging out.
That's cool.
They have moose now in Colorado.
That's really cool.
They reintroduced moose.
I didn't know they didn't have moose before.
Yeah, no moose, but now there's moose. And I'm like, this is incredible. This is majestic, right?
That is.
And so like what is that thing why do people manifest negativity, and why do they manifest? Why are some people different and able to manifest positivity?
Oh man, that's a huge question.
Sorry.
I was like, no. I like huge questions. You just got to put up with me, like, probably doing a lot of wandering.
Yeah,
in my answer.
Yeah, sure. No,
that's how I get through big questions. Is like talk it out loud, mm-hmm. kind of, you know.
Perfect.
Man, I'll tell you kind of my own, like, just kind of personal view, you know, on the world. That question kind of takes you to that space, right? On like the world and people and why people are the way that they are. Is I think at base level, like if we could all see absolutely clearly all the time, we would just look at the world and be like, man, like this is an extraordinary place, an extraordinarily beautiful place, an extraordinarily difficult, painful place sometimes too. But you know what, I think we would kind of, if we could all see clearly, we would like embrace it all, accept it all, feel both the beauty and the difficulty, and kind of, I think, be like, wow, how cool, I get an experience of like being here as a human for this limited amount of time that I get, you know, like if we were all seeing clearly all the time.
Yeah. I
think that's my opinion. Some people would disagree with me based upon how their life has gone. You know?
The ability to be grateful in the moment.
Be grateful to, and it's funny. I do a lot of reading of like kind of old spiritual teachers, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the things that they are often communicating is that at a certain point in your life, you get to where you can like genuinely appreciate the extraordinary beauty and kind of miracle of life in the world. And you don't turn away from the obvious like pain and difficulty and like you say unfairnesses or suffering, but you get to a place where you can just embrace all of it and be like, oh, okay, yep, this is amazing. Oh, yep, that hurts. But somehow I sense, man, I can kind of relax among it all and just be grateful to experience it all. You know, that's a very highly evolved way of seeing to attain.
Is that like wisdom?
I think it is.
Which comes with age or experiences or
yes.
something?
I think, gosh, I read some cool quote about wisdom. You're right, that they use that word.
Yeah.
And wisdom is to accept what is and kind of relax with it. And then oftentimes when we can do that, then we can, appreciate it to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the term I use a lot, and I can explain this in a minute too, but is like seeing clearly versus experiencing weather. Actually, I'll tell you now because this might fit well. So a couple years ago, I was walking north on the Flagstaff camp here in NAU in the campus, and I was looking at Mount Humphreys, and I was having one of those days where I was just like, I love my life, I love my job, I'm like good, like I'm good at what I do, I have great friends, like just like one of those where you're just savoring the moment and you're so grateful, you know, and I was looking at the mountain and I was like, man, I feel like the mountain on a clear day, you know, like I thought to myself when I was looking at the mountain and I was feeling like this, I was like, man, I really think that both me and like anyone, when you can see that you're a person of value, you're good at, you're important in whatever role you have, you're loved, all those things, you have all sorts of possibilities ahead of you. I think that's us like seeing ourselves the most accurately and the most clearly. And the reason I say I think that's us seeing ourselves accurately and clearly is because I could also see my weaknesses, you know, like I got some legitimate things that if I would adjust, my life would probably be better, my relationships would probably be better, my work would probably be better. But the thing is, those weaknesses didn't overshadow the basic truth about me and my life, you know, and so everything was in proportion. And I think that's really true for a lot of people, you know, like we have strengths and we're loved and valued, and we have some things that if we do adjust, probably our lives would be better, and maybe even the lives of people we're close to would be better too, you know. But that's what it is to be a person. It's just to have light and shadow. And I was walking and I was looking at the mountain and I was just like, man, this is not a bad metaphor, because as you know from living in Flagstaff, like sometimes there's cloud that sits right on top of the mountain, sometimes there's cloud that's in front of the mountain, and sometimes there's literally no mountain, like there's like the cloud completely obscures it. Yeah. And that's what it can be like to be a person too, right? Like you one day you're walking along and you're like, oh, man, I've done well for like good job, and I'm people I love and they love me, you know. And the next day you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I really messed that up, and you're overwhelmed with feeling of inadequacy because of some imperfection in whatever job you do or craft you do, or someone said something and who's close to you and now you've completely lost sight. So yeah, I use the term, I talk a lot about like seeing clearly and weather are the two terms I use a lot in my work with athletes. So back to your like original question, I think we just all differ to the degree to which how much weather we have. Like our kind of general mood state, our level of happiness, there's like some genetic predisposition to that. Yeah. So that would be one reason why some people their lens is colored more by negativity versus positivity. I think other reasons is just like what's happened to them in the past. Like, the events of our lives also really color our lens, because our brain is this like anticipation machine, and it always wants to be predicting like what's coming for us next. And if we have either like maybe we have a naturally more cloudy lens because of who knows, like genetics, the environment we grew up in, or maybe we've had stuff happen to us, you know, and because when we've had bad stuff, happen to us, that creates weather too. Yeah. So those are a couple reasons. I think what really makes a difference going forward for people, thanks. Yeah. I think what really makes a difference going forward for people is the degree to which they're able to notice how they see and understand that a lot of how we see has to do with our genetic weather, or you could even call it like events from our past, because sometimes even call it trauma. Like there's little T trauma and there's big T trauma, but just events from your past that have now made your brain color your experience in a certain way. The degree to which someone can recognize the coloring of any moment as kind of a construction of their own mind and maybe their own stories they're telling about their life. That ability to recognize really is predictive of someone's ability to, like, say, manifest positivity or manifest negativity. Because a lot of times people don't realize they have a choice, or they don't realize that the way that they see is arising from something going on inside of them, as opposed to what's actually going on in reality or in the external world. So that ability to recognize and understand, like, okay, the way that I see is one lens. And then to either like learn ways to see their weather, see through their weather, every so often clear their weather. I think their ability to learn these things also determines like whether or not they can. That was a really long answer for you.
So I'm very, very interested in this concept of personal agency and action. And I think I heard, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg said something about like, I'm only going to focus on the things that are within my scope of control.
Yep.
And I find that that's so powerful because the world, work, relationships, everything can feel so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and when it's out of your control, it feels particularly untenable and overwhelming. And I've worked really hard the last couple of years to kind of clear out all that noise, and like especially the media I consume or the types of information I consume. It's like a diet. It's like either processed information or whole foods.
Yes.
You know, you think of it like good, healthy information. And if you clear out all that other stuff and you just leave enough space for you to take action on the things that are within your scope of control, and you start knocking those things off the list, you start to feel better. You start to be able to feel like you're in control. Maybe that's my personal issues with control and like being in control of things, right? But I think for everybody it feels good. Now, if I translate this over to an endurance event, I'm not thinking about the weather that might come, like real weather, not
emotional weather.
Yeah, like because Colorado Trail Race, that was a real dangerous issue. Was the lightning above tree line and timing the passes correctly so that you weren't caught in literally a deadly lightning storm in the middle of these passes. So that was something that was somewhat in my control. The only thing that I could control is not the weather, the actual weather. It was how I timed these passes and if I made the right strategic stops so that I could look at the weather and time everything correctly. Right? And in work, it also translates over. Work in AU is it's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts. It gets very out of your control and you feel very helpless often in a giant, like kind of bureaucracy like that, right? A government place. And so finding those things like, oh, well, I can make this change in my business life and my personal life, and I can do this thing and I can take action on this. It started to get like when I was feeling low and the negativity, the demons, I call them, were like seeping in. Right. And I was like hyper focused on that stuff. It kind of started to pull me out of that a little bit. Right. And then the positivity kind of came with that a little bit on its own. So I felt like that was a really good tool for me, was just exhaust all the nonsense from your life. You know what I mean? The stuff that doesn't matter. Because it's like saturated. The world, we are saturated.
We are.
It, right?
With things that don't matter.
Things that aren't in our control. They might matter, but they're so far-fetched that, you know, like global politics, it's a little hard to like enact change. You feel helpless to enact change, but you can enact change in your local politics, right? And you can get involved at that level and start making those changes, and that feels good, you know? And I just think there's this bridge between life and endurance sports, you know, and having that mindset that like, so I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. because that's what I can do right now.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
I'm gonna eat this payday bar.
Yes.
Because that's what I can do right now.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes,
mean?
definitely.
Like the little things then all add up into these big things, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's interesting. And you talked about the few things from your previous podcasts that really were interesting is grit, the study of grit and resilience. And I looked up grit because my wife, she's an ultra runner, and she did the Cocodona 250
Oh, wow.
2 years in a row.
Wow.
So like she's got a lot of grit,
Yes.
you know, and I'm thinking, what exactly is grit? You know, what is the definition of grit? And I looked it up, and it's, so I'm interested to hear your opinion too, but I'm gonna read this first. Courage and resolve, strength of character is the Oxford Dictionary's definition.
Mm-hmm.
And then another article I read was a person with true grit has passion and perseverance. Goals are set and followed through. A person who works really hard to follow through on commitments has true grit. Yeah. So is that your definition of grit, or is there, what do you got?
Yeah, good question. So probably there's a psychologist, her name's Angela Duckworth, and she's the psychologist that has probably done the most foundational work on grit.
She wrote a book, right?
She did. Yeah, she did. And she's the one that defined it as passion and perseverance.
Okay.
Or at least that was her old definition. People are always evolving, but that was the original definition of grit, was passion and perseverance toward long-term goals.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, actually I was lucky. She was my advisor for my thesis for my graduate school, which was cool. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, it was very lucky. But if I'm remembering, like she was a passion for her was the notion that it isn't like necessarily like talent or giftedness that enables people to be successful in whatever field they choose. Actually, it's passion and perseverance, and that we all have the capacity to develop skills and become, I guess, what we might want to, and we shouldn't be limited by notions of, do I have it or not? You know, am I gifted or have enough talent? Grit really confronts the whole concept of talent, basically. And she was like, in her research, she mostly researched to begin with, like academia, like students.
Mm-hmm.
She would measure IQ versus like grades. She also studied like she's researched in other areas too, but a lot of her research did show that passion and perseverance, like hard work and effort, would trump measurable giftedness, let's say, whatever someone's IQ score might have been. So her main message there is, like if you want something, or you want to grow a skill, or you want to achieve something, or develop an ability, like you can. That's, I think, the thing that she would really want to come from the notion of grit is like you can. It's effort and time and effort and time and effort and time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would also agree, you know, as far as that being a definition of grit. I mean, one thing that I see that just makes me odd is something that I'm lucky in my life is I get to be a part of athletes' long-term journeys. Usually, like one of the most classic examples of that is like NAU, and I'll be there from their freshman year and kind of through to their 5th or 6th year now for some of them with COVID.
Yeah.
And the number of injuries and illnesses and setbacks some of those athletes experience, and then they come out the other side, and they actually do achieve their goals. They actually do have experiences that I think sometimes we doubt they're going to have because of the degree of struggle. Like, yeah, so that's a place I've seen grit is coming back from repeated injuries or setbacks and illnesses, and still achieving the thing they want to achieve. So that's classic. Other forms of grit, I'm trying to think of how to say this one, they're like kind of like less like socially praised accomplishment forms of grit, you know, like things that you don't see on the outside, you don't see with external results. So I recently, someone close to me, their father went through had a really terrible like illness, and they were there by their father's side right through to the end, and it was an absolute nightmare. Like the whole thing was an absolute nightmare, and they lost their father in the end. And I know they ended up in a real tough space at the end of that, but just the showing up every day, you know, and doing the right thing was to me grit. It didn't result in any accomplishment, but that's probably one of the most beautiful, impressive displays of grit I've seen. And it's something that wasn't social, like, no one knows about,
Right.
or very few people know about.
Right.
There's another athlete I work with who encountered like a really weird obstacle to their ability to train and compete, like a health issue that kept showing up for them. And we determined it actually was probably deep down like a psychological issue, or and we worked really hard to get to the bottom of what that was, always with the intention of this person coming back and compete, like hoping to regain the ability to compete. And this person like followed all sorts of paths of their own, like kind of within their own selves and their own psychology and their own beliefs and their own fears and their own vulnerabilities. And it was like a super brave exploration of all the factors that might be contributing to this physical issue that was showing up in their training and racing. And we kind of got to the bottom of it, and they were able to compete, and they competed, and they were like, I don't want to do it anymore. Now I got to the bottom of this. I worked through all my other stuff. I'm going to quit, and with peace.
Okay.
And right. So the, which was one of the most beautiful. I remember when that person told me that, I was like, wow, that is not what I was expecting. But there was something so whole about it for them.
Yeah.
So grit can take us on many different paths.
Yeah. So they basically found a different journey that they were wanting to be on, that they were trying to conclude.
Yeah. And which would be a bit it would be a bit different than the actual definition of grit, which is passion and perseverance toward long-term goals. That person set out with that definition because they were like, I want to get back to competing at a high level.
Yeah.
But instead it took them down a different path,
right,
which they were absolutely gritty about, which led them to quitting their sport with like kind of joy and freedom and peace. So that's, yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. Yeah, it is
for them.
Yeah, it is.
They found a peace with that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of endurance sports to me seems like, well, there's a mental health crossover that I've been recently exploring in the past couple of days, actually doing research for this podcast and discovering in my own journey with alcoholism and then sobriety and then endurance sports taking the place of that.
Yes. Yeah.
And then finding research that there's been some recent research that said that like there's a lot of eating disorders and alcoholism that correlates to endurance athletes, basically, and a lot of psychological issues. So there seems to be, and exercise is healthy for us, for people. Exercise is something we need to do. However, endurance sports are not exercise in moderation.
No.
It can easily cross over into a mental health battle. It's just masked by an achievement or a sport.
Yeah.
Right. And so, where's that line? Like, there's got to be a line between grit and like unhealthy mental health state.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, or where you're using your sport in a way that isn't healthy for
absolutely
healthy for you. Yeah.
I used it as so I'm an addict in the general sense of addiction. Like, I'll get addicted to things easily.
Yeah.
And bike packing, it promotes eating as many calories as you can.
Yeah.
And it promotes just like overfeeding, basically.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you gotta eat 4,000 calories in one sitting.
For sure.
Because you gotta go you're burning whatever, 8,000 calories a day or 6,000 calories a day or something, because you're riding 24 hours, sometimes 30 hours straight through, right? And I realized like, I was just like pulling the wool over my own eyes. I was just manifesting my addiction in this other way that I don't think is very healthy.
Yeah.
And like, am I gonna have consequences from that in 5 years?
From the actual
eating
that much food.
Eating 5,000 calories at gas station food.
Yeah. Kind of like, and like this, like how that makes you feel.
Yeah.
Like that was part of it.
So and there's definitely a when I get done with these events, there's a backside of it.
Yep.
So 6 days on the bike, not sleeping very well, sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night.
Yeah.
It's cold. And normally I have very healthy sleep. but it's like very disturbed sleep during these events. It's just the way it is, right? Especially if you're trying to go fast. So you have disturbed sleep, you have poor diet, and then you have adrenaline and dopamine and serotonin all like skyrocketed for like 5 or 6 days. And then you accomplish this thing. And then like you're done and you go back home and you go back to your day job. And for me, there's like actually a physical change because of all the sugar that I'm consuming. And then I'm pretty sure I'm detoxing off of sugar afterwards, because I'm just eating all sugar. It's just all sugar because your body somewhat requires that in order to. You're like an energy generating machine. Of course, you're just like sugar, calories in, and energy out, right, for 6 days. And then there's this like almost depressive back slope to it, physically and psychologically to it, you know. So there's a whole arc of an endurance event I see, and I'd really like to know your perspective on this. Going into it, I know you've talked a lot about nerves, managing pre-race, and I thought in one of the other podcasts you did, you said something super interesting that resonated with me, and it was that a lot of the endurance athletes that you see that aren't nervous, they've done the work leading into a race. They're confident. They're almost like tired of training and they just want to get it over with. Right. And then the people that are nervous or super nervous, and this is generally speaking, I think this isn't like everybody individually, but they maybe like didn't put in the work or the training plan that they should have in order to get themselves ready for this event. And maybe that's why they're nervous. So there's the nerve arc, there's the prep coming up into a race, there's the actual race itself, and then there's like the whole recovery and the backside of it. So I like, are there tips that you have for athletes in I know those are 3 very broad areas. So start with whichever one you want to.
Like, jump in.
Like maybe on the backside. Let's talk about like the depression side of things, right? Like for me, like is there anything I could do to continue to maybe find a more sustainable, less of like a polarizing emotional up and down where I'm in this high and then I have this down?
Well, I think they all do tie together. Like, I think that, you know, you've like the pre and the during and the after, they all kind of tie together. So I think like if we were to kind of answer that question about the backside, kind of feeling depressed on the other side, I think it can help to understand maybe like some of the factors that might have been driving the whole thing. And then now that they're temporarily removed because you don't have something right in front of you that you're like training for or hoping for or working for, why that might lead to feeling depressed. And like one beautiful thing about sport, or I think any craft that we get really passionate about, but you could say sport in particular, you could say like the mountain bike backpacking that you do, especially an endurance sport like that, because there's so many factors you have to manage, right? So it could just, there's a lot to think about and a lot to plan and a lot to control in the lead up to something like that, or try to, I guess.
Totally.
In that, I think I could take a step even further back and just say, like, because you were noticing that a lot of mental health struggles and endurance sports tend to overlap. And I don't know, like, I think what's at the heart of like mental health struggles, like I say, any of our mental health struggles, because I think we all have some to do like different degrees. It's just like, I think we have some underneath questions of like, who am I in the world? Am I okay in the world? Like, what's the world about? Like, what's the meaning? What's of value? What's worth my time? What's and I think one of the beauties of sport is it can sometimes answer some of those questions for a little bit. You know, it can be like, well, this is interesting to me. This endurance event is interesting to me, which means I'm going to invest my effort and time into it. So that gives me like some purpose and direction. Maybe there's some qualities I'm going to bring out of myself that I admire and I want to be through this. So this can provide like a bit of a pathway to some meaning and some direction and some order of thinking too. Like sometimes when we don't have a project, our mind can go all over the place. But when we have a goal or we have something that's kind of consuming, it creates some order in thinking because we have this to attend to and that to attend to like serve the serve our success.
A
And
mission.
A mission.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Totally.
So like endurance sport can create like the sense of meaning and purpose and way to be who we want to be. And not only that, it creates community too, right? Because you have friends around you who do this too, and or your partner does it too, or so you're all kind of heading towards this thing. So you feel another element of mental health struggles is feeling alone or not connecting to others, right? So it can provide some of that too. So endurance sport, yeah, anything that provides like a mission, like you said, and time and relationship, typically is going to help whatever struggle we're having. Plus, with endurance sport, if the training creates neurochemicals that also feel good, right? So it's like the whole mix of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that just kind of like helps buoy a person along for a while. Like when there's if it wasn't there might be like a little more struggle, a little more wondering, maybe a little more hurting. Because I think sometimes we carry more like just people that live with basic emotional pain, and so this can kind of ameliorate that for like a little while.
Yeah.
And then you get into the event and you're consumed with it with other people. So this is like still mission and purpose, and I'm being who I want to be, and I'm doing it with other people. But then the sugar side too, right? The diet, like in that sport. And then you get to the other side, and for a minute it all goes away because you have to rest, right? You got to recover from whatever it is you were doing. And you were probably super depleted from whatever you did, especially if it was a long endurance event like that. You're coming down off sugar. So the mission's gone for a little while. The community's gone for a little while. Your body's in a crummy state probably for a little while, until it recovers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, I think those in my opinion, everyone's going to have their own like reasons and their own experience and their own, their own reasons for feeling the way they do. But if I was to speak broadly, I think that those factors play a large role in why someone might feel depressed on the other side of a big event. It's just a bunch of stuff taken away and they're in a tired state.
Yeah. I've seen people try to combat that by immediately signing up for other events right away. And I don't think that's healthy either.
Yeah.
Like I think that I'm going to try to work to find peace on that backside in the recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like live in the afterglow like of the accomplishment a little bit more. If I finished what I was pursuing, it's a whole different thing. If you scratch, it's a whole different bag of shit that you have to deal with, which I've also dealt with, and many other people have. Right? There's few people who accomplish 100% of the things they say they're going to do. I think that's more rare. And maybe glamorized and romanticized a little bit more. Yeah. But there are people that, go out and they sign up for these thing after thing after thing after thing. And I think they're just chasing the dragon really. Yeah. On this thing. Right. And I don't know if that's healthy either, So yeah. I tried to enjoy this one a little bit. I took some time off, went for some walks, went for some hikes. Like I'm mixing in running with biking because it's a different stimulation.
Yeah. Yep.
Running has provided just an alternative kind of feeling and stimulation for me. So I am signed up for a 100-mile run.
Nice.
Next
Good for
month.
You.
I was signed up before the Colorado Trail Race because I wanted to do the longest bikepacking race I've ever done and the longest running race I've ever done, a foot race. And I figured the Colorado Trail Race, since there's so much hiking. Yeah. I mean, I probably hiked my bike like maybe 200 miles. Yep. Like pushed my bike up 13,000 foot peaks. Geez. Yeah, like a 50-pound bike.
Oh my God.
So I figured that was great training for, my toes are still numb.
Yeah.
Like I have foot problems from it. But I figured it was really good training for like a foot race.
Yeah.
We're going to do primarily hiking. And halfway through the Colorado Trail Race, I was like, I think I'm going to drop the 100. I think I'm going to downgrade the 100-mile running race to a 55K. Okay.
You're thinking this partway through?
I had a moment of weakness, right? And I was like, because I was thinking like, I don't really want to do, because I'm like dying up there, 13,000 feet, can't breathe, nothing to eat. And I'm thinking about that stupid thing instead of just thinking about what I'm doing right in that moment, And so I try to like vanquish that from my brain. And just think, okay, just be here, man. Like be here in this right now.
Yep.
Be present in this. And that kind of leads me to this idea of like flow state that you've talked about before. And I'm fascinated by flow state. I'm fascinated by the ability to get into it and to get out of it. I have a very active mind, like very intrusive thoughts, things come in that don't really matter. I'm predicting scenarios. When I'm driving down the road, I'm predicting things that are so far-fetched and never going to happen. Like, oh, what if this car pulls out in front of me and does this, and I have to swerve? And so I'm constantly, so it's really good in situations of crisis, because I'm like kind of pre-prepared for stuff. But in like normal life, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, right? And you just want to like calm the scenarios that your brain is continually creating, right? Crisis or not, right?
Yeah, definitely.
In bikepacking, or in ultra running, it's, it manifests itself in, what if you get this mechanical on your bike?
Yeah.
Or what if your bladder gets a hole in it and you don't have any water?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a survival scenario, it's a fantastic way to have backups.
Yes, it is.
But in an everyday life scenario, it's really kind of too much sometimes. And I find that doing something that's trail running or mountain bike riding, it's so engaging and there's consequence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find this with road running. Road running, I can just you can just wander, and just all the intrusive thoughts can come in, right? Because I'm just running down a road.
Yes.
But when I'm trail running and I'm kind of having to pick my lines and make sure I don't crash and make sure I don't hit my head on a tree.
Yeah.
Same with mountain biking. I'm locked into the moment.
Yeah.
I'm engaged. And I feel like that is the entering the wormhole of the flow state for me.
Yeah.
Is that what flow state is?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Where nothing else can come in. You're just fully present in the current moment.
Yep. I would say so. If there's a whole bunch of those who have done research on flow state, they have 9 kind of criteria that can tell you're in flow state. But if we were to summarize them all, it's basically just being focused on the task you're doing in that moment.
Okay.
So yeah, and I could totally see why trail running or mountain biking would bring you to flow state, because you have to pay attention, because there's the root and the rock and the line and it calls your attention right to
there's
the moment. There are. Yep. So it's funny, I've never thought of it this way before, but it's almost like fear serves flow state in that case, right? It recognizes that the most critical thing for your being okay is you to be focused right now. So it helps you be present. Yeah.
It's almost like a ancient hunter-gatherer survival technique.
Yep.
Right? There's danger, and you have to be engaged in that moment to either escape the danger or hunt or whatever, to be in order to gather food for your family and your tribe, or gather resources or whatever.
Yep.
It seems like it's you're tapping into something that's so deeply programmed in us,
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, it's a interesting state, because you don't realize when you're going into it, but once you're past it and back into regular society, you realize what had just happened.
Totally.
Almost like a drug-induced state. It's because it is, I think, endogenously, chemically, whatever's happening, there's drugs, right? Like endogenous drugs being released.
Well, when you're in flow state, you the parts of your brain responsible for actually fear and pain are inhibited. So you're not as aware of either one of those things. Plus your brain waves actually slow down. And the other thing that is interesting with flow state is your prefrontal cortex, which is what's responsible for most of our executive thinking, just our basic random thoughts that come into our head, and also receives less blood. So you literally do just drop in into the moment, and intrusive thoughts and thoughts about the future don't happen, because that part of your brain responsible for them just doesn't get as much blood. So it's interesting.
That's interesting.
Yep.
You're a runner?
Yeah.
You an endurance runner?
Yeah. I try to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have experienced these things.
Yeah.
Like flow state and.
Yeah.
Do you like that state?
Oh yeah, I sure do. It's so it's most often we experience that state when things are going well. So I think we can probably all relate to the feeling of on a training run, you feel great. Maybe it's a trail run and maybe you're running downhill. There's nothing like running like good technical downhill.
Yeah.
And feeling great, right?
Yeah.
And so you're running downhill and it's so fun and that's all you're focused on. The place is beautiful and your life is perfect. And like, yeah, I definitely do.
And then you slip on a route.
And you're like, you're like, oh, it takes you right out of it. Yeah.
And everything changes and you realize you were like, oh, I was being overconfident.
Yeah, that too. That too.
That's funny. I've also been experimenting with this idea of visualization. And visualizing finishing really myself getting through the finish line of these various things, right? Can you talk a little bit about your approach to visualization and how it can help athletes?
Yeah. So the way my primary tip for visualization is well, first of all, it's an excellent, powerful tool because it helps us practice like being who we want to be inside of any race or training session or whatever it is that we have coming for us. That's basically the large benefit of it, is we get to practice like taking the actions and making the decisions that we want to make out there. We get to do that in advance, which creates neural connections around those things. So it makes it more habitual for us to make the decisions we want to make in the race if we practice making those decisions before the race. But yeah, my primary tip is actually to decide in advance like what kind of decisions and actions you want to see yourself take throughout whatever a race you have. And in yours, man, it's so long, it might be like you got a few days worth of possibilities to bring to mind, right? Yeah. But what I usually advise with athletes is imagine like where things usually get difficult and decide in advance like the decision you want to make in those difficult moments. Like maybe you see yourself in an aid station, or not, you wouldn't even have an aid station in your
Circle
event.
K.
Sorry?
A Circle K.
A Circle K. You're in a Circle K and you're like, you're in a terrible mood and you just had to fix a flat or something like that. And you got 250 miles to go and you're like, should I just drop? Is this really good for me? Maybe I should. There's another race in a month. Shouldn't I could drop, you know what I mean? And you know you don't want to do that. Like maybe you know like, no, in advance, I know I'm committed to the end of this one. And I just want to see myself get through it. You'd see yourself in that Circle K feeling like that. It's important to bring to mind like how something hard might feel and see yourself get back on the bike and ride 5 miles up the road. Or maybe if you're competing, you know, and you're now, I don't know, 480 miles into your 500-mile race, and man, maybe you have a goal you're trying to achieve, maybe a time, maybe you want to catch somebody, you know, and but you're just maybe in the past you got to that 480-mile mark and I just don't care about this anymore. I could push, but I don't care, you know, you do care, right? So you see the I don't care show up in advance of the race. And you're like, okay, when the I don't care shows up, I'm going to like make sure I'm at an effort level at least 7 out of 10 for like 10K. And like you make a plan of what you're going to do when that mental or emotional obstacle shows up for you, and you see yourself make the decision you want to make in advance. So like I work with probably a lot of who I work with is like a lot of track and road runners, right? And cross country runners. And a really normal thing for them is they get to the middle of their race and like if they're probably running their absolute best, they get to the middle of their race and they're like, I don't know if I can hold this till the end of the race. Yeah. And that moment, and they feel bad and they start to get kind of a negative wave starts to come over them. And if they're in a 5K and they've still got 6 laps to go and they're just like, I'm starting to feel like I can't hold this pace. In their visualization, they would anticipate getting to that moment and they'd see themselves in that moment. They would try to bring to mind the feelings they'd have in that moment, but they would be like, all right, I know when I hit that place, I'm just going to focus on 1 lap at a time. I'm going to focus on just staying with the athlete I'm with 1 lap at a time. And they would see themselves in their misery, just stay and stay and stay. And they might then see themselves stay to the end of the race. One thing I suggest to athletes, usually broadly, is try not to see a particular outcome So try not to see yourself finishing in like under 30 hours or whatever. That's not going to be the case for your event, but I'm thinking of another, maybe a 100-miler or something like that. Or try not to see yourself if it's finishing under a certain time or like in first or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is, if you do that, and then if at any point in the race, it's clear that's not going to happen, people will just give up.
Ooh,
like it's like way more likely for people to give up.
It's tragic.
It is.
Yeah,
yep.
That's a tragic feeling.
It is. It sets you up for that, which we don't want, So what I would suggest instead is to see yourself finishing proud of yourself and leave the specifics out. Leave the specifics out, and then you'll stay more resilient. Like you'll stay more resilient the whole way through.
So does this visualization, does this look like meditation? Does this look like while you're training, you're visualizing this? Like at what point is it good to visualize these things?
Yeah.
Or the techniques?
I think people have very different and personal ways that they use visualization. The classic way I teach it, like if I'm teaching it to a group, I basically will tell them to create a race plan. Like how do they want to execute the race roughly? We can't get too rigidly attached to anything, but like roughly how do they want to complete the race? Then we break the race into chunks, and and I'll ask them, okay, like if you want to execute the race like that, what are like 3 key decisions you're going to need to make? So maybe they're going to be like, I need to be patient at the start. I need to commit to something that feels too hard in the middle. And then I need to take risks at the end, no matter how I'm feeling. And I'm reverting about a little to my cross country and track stuff.
Sure.
But you can probably expand that right over to your event too.
Sure.
It's just like, how do I want to execute this race? What decisions am I going to have to make and actions am I going to have to take to do that, And you plan kind of roughly where you think those are going to happen. And then I'd say, like one way of doing it is to sit down quietly by yourself and see yourself reaching those, sit down quietly by yourself, make the image as vivid as you can. So make it as realistic as you can. So imagine what you'd see in the space, what you'd hear, what you'd be feeling physically and emotionally, what you'd be smelling, what you'd be tasting, and see yourself make those decisions based upon how that's actually going to feel in real life. Now, if you were running an 800, you could probably visualize it in real time, because it's probably like a 3-minute event or slower. If you're running a 100-miler, there's just no way in heck you're going to visualize that in real time, right? So I would just bring up, maybe you might do a 5 to 10 minute visualization, and you might see yourself entering that moment where you want to make a certain decision. Maybe spend a minute or two seeing yourself make the decision and carry on the way you'd want to. Maybe you have 5 of those or something, and so you spend 1 to 2 minutes visualizing yourself making those key decisions, and then you see yourself proud of yourself at the end of the race. So in a longer race, it's harder to do it in real time.
Oh, I know exactly where it's going to happen on the 100,
right?
Because I ran a duo with my wife last year.
Okay.
And I ran the first 56-mile stretch.
Yep.
And it's going to happen at mile 60.
There you go. That's where experience is beautiful.
Right.
Right? Because you're just like, oh, I know. And where I think a mistake people will do with visualization is they'll see themselves have no problems. They'll be like, oh, I got tired in mile 60 last time and lost my focus.
Right.
Well, this time I'm gonna see it not happening.
Right.
And that's not a good idea.
Right.
Because then when it does happen, you're you're worse off.
Right. You're setting yourself up for a letdown. And that feeling is so, like I said before, it's so tragic to, on previous races, I've done my timing sheets, so I've done kind of my planning, where I should be at what point.
Yep.
And I've maybe pushed beyond what I think. I've gotten a little aggressive, I guess, with my timing.
Yep.
And I actually should. I'm realizing I should have done it the other way. I should have backed off a little on the timing, so when I'm rolling in ahead of these key waypoints, I'm feeling good because I'm doing better than I thought I was.
Totally.
Yep. Just that little thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I applied that at CTR and it worked. I was like, okay, I'm constantly ahead, so I can sleep an extra hour.
Yes.
Or an extra 2 hours.
Nice.
And so I had this feeling of okay, things aren't bad. I'm good. I'm setting, I'm good. I'm running ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That helps with flow state too. When you can notice yourself doing well, if you can give yourself, if you get positive feedback, that helps flow state as well, because you'll like, you feel safer. The more safe we can feel, the more, it's funny, it sounds a bit contradictory, because you're noticing moments when you don't feel safe, you have flow state, right? Like technical trail and stuff.
Right.
But generally, if you're in an event where there's not like a dangerous challenge right in your face, what helps us feel safe is knowing we're doing okay. And so like you get a little ahead and you're like, good job. You get a bit of dopamine, it's a reward neurochemical, which helps with flow state, and you feel safe, so you can drop into the moment. And
another thing that worked well for me was seeing a bear.
Oh, really?
Because you get all jacked up once you see an animal like that. You're like, ah,
totally.
Ah, you're like super juice of adrenaline.
All of a sudden, yourself, you're feeling sorry for yourself out there, is like overwhelmed by, oh my gosh,
Well, and one thing that was really interesting that happened on CTR was I ended up connecting up with another racer. His name is Greg Dunham, and he has spina bifida.
Okay.
And he has essentially his calves never formed. And he's out there doing this thing, right? And we connect up, and all of my whole worldview at that moment just like shifted, because I had this perspective of someone who has a way more difficult time hiking up these mountains.
Totally.
He's got quad muscles, but he doesn't have any calf muscles.
Interesting.
So he can pedal a bike okay. He's really a talented rider. And he can hike okay, but he's got to hike a little differently than everybody else, because of the way his body formed. And it immediately like catapulted me into this other perspective. Like, you have no room to say anything about how you feel right now.
Right.
Because look at this guy, and look how inspiring this guy is. Right? And how incredible. And he's not taking any prisoners either. He's like, I'm out here, we're gonna do this. This is about getting done with this. Like, and he was a first-time CTR rider as well as me. And we really had a bonding moment. But having that perspective reset, also, it like infused energy in me. It infused a whole different I guess appreciation for what I was doing in that moment. Right. Which dynamically changed the last 2 days of that race.
Totally. Well,
right?
that's like with you were asking kind of like about like manifesting positivity, or and perspective shifts like that. Those are the things that help us see through the weather, and then your whole world changes, right? Like the event stays the same, like the challenge stays the same, your body stays the same, your circumstances stay the same, but you see them entirely differently. And you got a moment like that. It was one of those moments I'll remember forever, right? Just because, and we finished together. We spent the last 30 hours. We did a solid push through the night together to finish together. And it was just like, that's like trauma bonding or trail bonding kind of. And I've had a few of those in these events where you really bond with this person. And you have this unexpected moment, with this person, and you'll never be the same. Like the two of you will never be the same. And that's really, really, really special. And that's one of the reasons why, like, the community aspect of it is kind of, I'm converting from like the physical accomplishment aspect of it to like the community aspect. And the relationships that I'm forming and the crew, and with this podcast, it really helps like connect at a new level after that. Awesome.
But on the perspective piece, another interesting thing seems to happen when you're back in the normie life after these things, is my perspective gets reset. Like, I don't get caught up in the minutia as easily, into like the silly little work drama or a silly little life drama. Because you did this thing that just transported you into a different dimension for 5 days. And then you come back and you're like, oh, everything is easier after this. Like, I don't have to filter my water. I don't have to ration my food. I can sleep in a nice bed, not this like really horrible pad that I froze on. You get back into your normal life, and you're just like riding the wave of, wow, this is great. Life is pretty easy. We got life. Life is pretty good around here, right? And then that kind of fades away. 3 months, And then you're like caught up in the minutia again, and you're like, oh, this work drama. I don't know if I can handle myself.
Yes.
And then you go back out, and for me, like I have to go back out and do another one, right? To kind of just like, and it's like this cycle. And I don't know if it's a healthy cycle or not, but it's a cycle of perspective.
It is a cycle of perspective.
Right? Because we seem to, as people, we seem to acclimate into whatever the hardest thing is that we're doing at that moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we do. Our world closes. It like closes into whatever is like our world at that moment. We forget the other world.
Right. That's like the hardest thing that we've ever done is that particular thing we're doing at that moment.
It's true.
Right. And then you do something that levels it up, and then it gains you that perspective. But then it doesn't hold.
Yeah.
Rarely have I seen people, maybe back to the wisdom piece, seen people that can be in that state all the time of that perspective.
I know, huh? You know what I think comes as I'm working on this myself too. But like one thing that I think comes with wisdom, is, or time, especially if you are kind of noticing this pattern and you have a desire to want to retain kind of your maybe the wiser perspective that you get from the race that weekend. Yeah. Is I think we get better and better at realizing when we're closing in and seeing that's what's happening. Like, let's say you like, one way I would see it is just you have this 500-mile bike race. You're out in the wilderness for however long. So you're in contact with like, just one of the healthiest environments and energies you could be in contact with, right? You're like right there. Mm-hmm. And you're fatigued, so you're open, you're vulnerable, you're exposed. So it's like you and your vulnerable self in relationship with nature and survival and other people. And you're doing it together, right? So you're like open to all of this. And that becomes your world and it opens you. And then you come back in this open state and you get to appreciate your running water and your comfortable bed and all that. So you really kind of see more, you really get open and you see clearly, right? Mm-hmm. And then you are in your work environment and that contact with that experience and that vulnerability and that community just fades away a little bit. It's no longer in like front of center. In your face, I guess. And we kind of forget, we this new thing becomes our whole world. But I think as we do a bunch of cycles of that, and as you work on becoming more and more aware, over time you can actually notice how you open in the beautiful race space, and then you notice how you slowly close maybe in the workspace. And the key is that you start to see the closing as closing, and you're like, oh, this is something that's happening. It's kind of being, my mind is constructing this because this is the space I'm in, but maybe it doesn't have to be this way. Like maybe I can't listen. This is where one place where like meditation can be really helpful is, meditation can be a place where we open again to like what, usually a great use of meditation is to open what is present right now. Yeah. But you can be intentional with it too. And intentionally like, include your awareness of nature and wilderness, include your awareness of the other people like you who are in that race, who are now doing their lives. And so, I think wisdom comes from noticing the natural human tendency to close, but then noticing that it's a human tendency and either just relaxing with it and being like, oh, this is normal, I see it for what it is, or maybe engaging in some practices that help to open. Yeah.
Like mindfulness meditation?
Like mindfulness meditation, yeah.
Yeah, I did that for a few years, and it was interesting how it is another way I think of entering flow state.
Yeah, it definitely predisposes you to have more experiences of flow because it's basically, it exercises the muscles probably isn't the right word, but the parts of your brain that are responsible for being present, it exercises them. So it makes them more capable of being present. So then you're more likely to have more flow. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like you visualized yourself as like on a hillside on a busy highway.
Yep.
And the cars passing by were your thoughts.
Yes, that's good.
And you were becoming a spectator of your thoughts.
Yeah.
And that was really good for the kind of the intrusive thought kind of aspect. Because then you kind of rose above being in it.
Yes.
And you could be a spectator. And then once you understood that was happening, you could kind of let it go a little easier.
Definitely.
Right?
Yep.
And that definitely worked well. I don't know why I stopped doing it. I think I ramped up training.
Probably, right?
But I should, it's like it was a space I carved out every day where it just was like, all right, it's me and this practice with my thoughts, you know,
Yeah.
and that seemed very healthy. This was like 2020, 2021. So
Yeah.
during like the depths of COVID and all, you know, the chaos and the mental health crisis pretty much that was going on during COVID. And there was a lot going on during that time.
There was.
Yeah. So, do you, what about sleep deprivation?
Oh gosh.
Do you know much about this? It's something I've explored a lot.
I don't know a lot about it, to be honest, other than when me or anybody I know is sleep deprived, our weather gets worse. Like, or the, you know, like the
mental weather,
our ability to see clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Decision-making capabilities severely degrade. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, because it's a big thing in ultra sports that I've been kind of experimenting with and exploring and looking at the long-term health benefits and I know that's not your area of expertise. One place that I have also been exploring is, I feel like endurance sports are a kind of a filter of victim mentality, I call it. It seems like, and this is kind of concurrent with mental health. I'm not saying mental health and victim mentality are the same thing, but it seems like people that persist through and become successful in endurance sports don't perceive themselves as victims.
Okay.
This is my opinion. They seem to take agency, take action. If they fail, they put things in place to have success next time. They seem to be like go-getters, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Right. Now they do have, there's a lot of like mental health issues with that, but it seems like victim mentality is something that can creep in when you're in your darkest moments in a race.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And like I start to make excuses or look for reasons to get out or look, basically, like I feel like I create I'm perceiving myself as a victim. Like, I don't want this thing to happen to me, so I'm going to bail out of this race or whatever. And it seems like the people that are most successful that float to the top are able to combat that and say, I'm not a victim. I'm going to persist through this and I'm going to get to the other side of that.
Yeah.
Right. Is that something that's like intertwined with like grit? Or like psychologically, I'm just so interested in the concept of why we see ourselves as victims sometimes.
Yeah.
In what circumstances?
Man, that's an interesting question. I think, that kind of goes back a little bit to probably even outside of sport, and how people see themselves and cope outside of sport.
Yeah.
I think a victim mentality can sometimes be like a protective way of seeing things. Like, I think sometimes people go forward in their lives with hopes, like, with hopes and dreams or visions about who they want to be or what they want to have happen in their life. And if those things don't happen, or if they're taking too long to happen, one protective mechanism our brain can come up with to cope with that is, it's because so-and-so is an asshole, or it's because I don't have as much money as somebody else, or no one supports me, or I don't know, it's so unfair, I get hurt all the time, and I think there's some anger inside of victim mentality, right? It's like, I've been hard done by in some way. And an actual clinical psychologist probably have even more to say on this than me, but I do see it, and I experience it from time to time too, feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes that stuff shows up when we're struggling to like just kind of feel the pain of disappointment, or we're struggling to accept this is just how life goes sometimes, or sport goes sometimes. Because if we've worked really hard for something, or we've been really hoping for something, and it doesn't happen, sometimes it's just the way things went, it's just the way that life went, and it's hard to accept that that's the way life can be, because then that means we're not in as much control as we thought we were. So yeah, I think victim mentality shows up when we're hurt by something or hurting, and we don't kind of want to just face the fact it hurts, or it shows up when something didn't go the way that we want to, and we're having trouble accepting this is the way life is, you know? So in a race, yeah, like, those two things could carry into the middle of a race, I guess. Like, I think if we got into the middle of a race or the middle of anything hard, you know, like
it seems to be that's where it gets tested.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where it gets pressure tested.
For sure it is. And I think it comes down to a little bit of our story about how this should go. Like I'm thinking about something I've got going on in my own life right now with like something personal. And I feel like sometimes I feel angry about the issues. Sometimes I feel sad about the issues. Sometimes and I'm realizing that like the anger or sometimes I'm trying to fix it. You know, I'm in my head, I'm like trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And all of it is just resistance to that. Sometimes this is how things go in life, and I can't always control it. And there wasn't something I did wrong, and there's not something that this person did wrong. It's just sometimes this is the way things go. Yeah. And this is like in a race, right? Like sometimes in a race, you do everything you can to be like well fueled and well trained and have all your equipment ready and prevent anything going wrong. And sometimes things just still go wrong, you know, and we struggle with that because that means we're not completely in control. And so victim mentality is, this isn't unfair. This is unfair. This shouldn't have gone this way. It's because I don't have money. I should have money. I should have a better bike, or I should, you know what I mean? It's like a way of reacting and just not accepting that this is the way it goes sometimes.
Right.
It's gonna hurt and it's just gonna suck.
Right.
I don't know if that,
the phrase, that's God's will.
Yeah.
Like it seems like I'm not religious, but it seems like that's a very good solution for that. Religious, folks, they accept when things go wrong. They accept.
Yep,
that's just the way God wanted it.
Yep.
That seems like it's so. They embrace that part of it. That gives them a tool.
Yep.
To embrace when something isn't going their way.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, for me as a non-religious person, it's sometimes hard to find that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Tool to just embrace that
yeah.
thing, right? I guess the way I do it is taking action.
Yep.
That's the tool I use to get myself out of that mindset. Right?
Yeah.
Is, well, I'm going to do this then, right? Sometimes try to fix things too. I'm a bad like fixer. Like when things sometimes don't need to be fixed.
I hear you. Me too.
Sometimes they just need to like have space.
Totally.
And I'm like, this, and this is going to get fixed, personal and business life.
Me too.
Sometimes like, I'm like, why did I get involved in that? Right. Yeah. That was a bad idea.
Yeah. You just need to yeah.
Let it be God's will, for lack of a better term, right? Let it be the universe's will. Let's replace the word God with the universe,
totally.
Right? Like sometimes it's just the universe's will. And that's what you just got to go with, right?
There's this phrase you might like. It kind of, I think, is along the lines of this conversation. There's a few angles of this. This is like one of my favorite things. Actually, is kind of like this, the notion of letting go of control and not all being on you, and having some trust that there's something's good. It's not all on you to do it. And if we just back off, it'll actually resolve a whole lot better. Things will turn out a whole lot better.
Almost always.
I know. But I was reading, I think there's a book by a Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron is her name. And the book is called When Things Fall Apart. It's a great book. I read it really recently, and it was so helpful for like this issue that I was working with. And she said, I can't remember exactly how it was written, but it was like, you can't catch the horse by chasing the horse, but if you don't chase the horse, you'll never catch it.
Okay.
This
amazing.
I don't know if it's like a koan or whatever, like a Zen, you know, she's not Zen, but like, and that's true in a way, right? Like, like when we talk about these things, like sometimes this is just the way things go, you know, and we got to sometimes accept that, but that doesn't mean we stop working towards the things that the things that we want.
Yeah.
So it's just that paradox. Almost, it doesn't make sense. Like you can't catch the horse by chasing it, but if you chase it, you'll never catch it.
Right.
We know that's true. Like we know that's true in life in a way. And I think it's just, we got to try to do our best to be present in each moment and know to what degree do we chase now and to what degree do we let go. And maybe that's wisdom too. You learn that, learn that over time.
Yeah. There's so much nuance to this.
Yeah. And
right.
Intuition and instinct and like say relationship with whatever you feel is larger than you, even if they're,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. One thing you might find interesting, and it does follow the religious spiritual path. It's kind of hard to get away from that when it comes to like meaning, purpose stuff. But something I've been super interested in recently and been incorporating a lot in like team stuff is the story of like the notion of the hero's journey.
Okay.
You heard of the hero's journey?
Vaguely.
I know. I think it like rolls. Most of us have heard of it. So
Yeah.
basically, what the hero's journey is, it's a myth, and it's a myth it's a myth, and so it's a story. It's like a myth that's a story framework. Like, so kind of myths typically tell us like kind of like how our lives kind of should go, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
And the hero's journey myth is basically hero sets out on an adventure, runs into trouble they never expected, gets crushed by life, and then is like reborn in some way that makes their life better and also enables them to be a greater contributor to life as a whole. And it's actually like that basic framework, like that basic mythological framework is probably, it's like the central story of so many religions, like heroes. And it's even found within the stories of primitive cultures who have never been exposed to the Western world. So it's known as an archetypal myth, which means that it's like possibly universal. And there's even some experts that claim that it's embedded in our psyche, that we are wired to live out a hero's journey.
Okay.
And it basically what it involves is adventure, and then ego death, and then the rebirth of a new perspective. And and so it's, I don't know, that's just it's a framework and a notion about kind of life that I've been personally exploring a lot lately, and then exploring with like some athletes. But I find like endurance, it kind of fits well a lot of times with an endurance athlete's path, both in life, because like your life path is going alongside your sporting path, right? But it can help with some sense of purpose, if someone has any inclination to open to myth, that there might be some truth in myth, but it's outside of religion, which can be helpful.
Yeah, that can be ego.
Yeah.
What is it? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Right? That seems to be big. This seems to be a big issue that people struggle with, both in track and field and endurance sports, is comparing yourself to other people.
Yep.
This concept of racing your own race.
Yep.
Right? My wife has no problem with her ego. Her ego's good to go. No ego.
Nice.
She can just go out and do whatever and be cool with it.
That's right? Fortunate. Yeah.
You know? And I am not that good, but I have an ego.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I feel like it's good because it pushes me.
Yep.
But then it also can tip over quickly, and the boat can roll over and just completely destroy my mindset.
Yep.
Going into an event because I'm pushing too hard or trying to keep up with somebody who I shouldn't be trying to keep up with.
Totally, yeah.
Or whatever. Any tools or tips or anything to try and deal with ego?
Yeah, for sure.
In comparison?
Yep, yeah, for sure. Yep. So the way I see the ego is and there's all sorts of different names for this depending on like what book you're reading, or whether you're looking through a neuroscientist lens or a Buddhist scholar's lens, or whatever. But the way I see ego is it's the part of our brain that's looking out for us alone. It's the part that sees the human being as a isolated self that needs to protect itself from the rest of life. And like you say, it has we do need an ego. There is a such thing as a healthy ego. And I think you're right. Like, the healthy ego is the part of you that trusts your training and is like, I think maybe I can take a chance in this race. Let's see, I think I'm capable. Like, that's all great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's also the part that's like, I need to look after my close relationships. I need to make sure I'm eating well. I need to make sure I'm getting sleep. Like, it's a part of you that looks after you, so that's good. But the ego is so sensitive to your like safety and security and belonging and all that. So it's super sensitive to any factors that threaten that. And when it comes to comparison, something that I think all of us humans carry inside of ourselves is that we have the desire to be like feeling safe and connected to our community. Like, and our community is, we're athletes, is usually our athletic community, or our team, or your group, of long distance mountain backpackers, right?
Yeah.
That's your community. And the reason our ego is like so attached to us feeling safe and secure in our community is because thousands of years ago, when we were like primitive people living in tribes in the wilderness, we lived in interdependent tribes. So we had like everybody played a role, and if you didn't have your tribe, you'd probably die. So the degree to which you were like accepted and wanted within your tribe affected your survival.
Right.
And the people who have higher status were the ones that got the all the resources, all the best mates, they were protected if there was a threat to the society. So we've inherited like this super primitive notion about like how we needed to fit into our society, and our ego still looks like through that lens. Only now status is who's placing highest in the race,
Yep.
who's competing at that fastest time, who has the best job with the most money, who's married and has kids, who's, you know what I mean? Like this is where status comes from. So now our ego, it's seeking those things because that's what our society tells us we need to have in order to be safe and wanted and popular and all that. Plus it's super sensitive to any loss of that. So like if you're in a race and maybe you started with a healthy ego, like maybe you're like, I've so fit this, like I'm really feeling fit. My training's been awesome. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to stay with these guys, or I'm going to take a chance at this goal I have. You know, I think I can finish in under whatever hours. Let's go out on this pace. That's totally okay. Why not take a chance in sport, you know? But let's say it starts to not work out partway through the race, and then this gap starts to form, and you're you're not keeping up, and now someone who's slower than you passes you. That's what really triggers people, is right. You're like, then your ego goes crazy because now I'm not only am I not getting the goal that I wanted, now I'm losing status. Losing status is terrifying. I'm a failure. Yeah. What are people going to think? And like losing status, we are freaked out about losing status. So
but we can't in that moment, some people can in that moment say, like, get rid of that ego, get rid of that self, you know, status, and say, good for this person.
Yeah.
This person's caught up to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You like, in their eyes, they're having the opposite.
Yes, totally. They're like, oh my gosh, I
can't believe
Dylan.
I'm with that person.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm having such a good day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So could we take a moment and just, you know, how can we all do better at that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because you did ask me how do I work with it, and I kind of explained it, but didn't tell you how to work with it. So I think the first step is understanding why it's happening. That, to me, one of the primary challenges I want, especially with young athletes, but this goes up, like it's not just young athletes, it's every athlete that I know deals with it, but is struggles with comparison. Yeah. And the first step I will always take is just helping them understand why. And the most important thing for them to know is it's not their fault. It's no one's fault. And we don't know that because people don't talk about it because they feel ashamed about the fact they're comparing themselves to their buddy, you know, or they got passed by their teammate. It's like not a good person who's upset their teammate passed them or their friend passed them, right? That's what we think. But the thing is, no, we're all, and people will say to me, I know I shouldn't care about what people say, or I shouldn't care about like where I fall. And I'm like, actually, you're a human being, so you are wired to care. So you absolutely should. Like, and it's not your fault that you care, that is upsetting for you.
Yeah.
So the first step is understanding where it comes from, which usually the way I help somebody understand is like just the way I just explained it. But then after that is you give yourself a little bit of compassion, like a critical thing before you go and you're like, good for you to that person who passed me, or way to go, guys, you know, so much respect for how fit you are, is you notice kind of the pain and the distress that your freaked out ego is experiencing. And you're like, oh man, like, I know why this is. This is because I'm getting dropped. I'm getting a bit of a hit to my ego. I'm not, maybe today wasn't the day I hoped it would be, or I kind of was a little attached to it being. It's natural that I'm going to react to that. Oh, there goes my buddy. Oh, that felt really bad. It's natural that I feel upset my friend passed me. And you just offer yourself a bit of care for the pain of it and the struggle of it, kind of the way you would someone you care about, you know? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have trouble doing that for ourselves directly. It doesn't feel, it can really take some time and practice to actually feel care for yourself. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people have an easier time like experimenting. Like, if this was someone I loved, what would I tell them? Probably something like, "Oh man, you took a chance and it didn't work out. It's okay. Good for you for taking a chance. It's okay you're reacting this way. It's normal to react this way." So I'd say the understanding and the compassion piece is really important. And the reason for that is if we immediately like judge ourselves, like you shouldn't be upset your friend passed you. What were you thinking you could go with those guys? So, if we immediately judge ourselves, all that does is it actually it's like a attack on the ego, and the ego will defend itself, and it'll just fire right up and continue to be upset, And so we fire our ego up by judging it and by resisting it and criticizing it. And instead, if we understand it, it'll calm down, and it'll be, you might not feel good still, probably not, but you can get focused on the task. You get focused on the next part of your plan.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
You like embrace what's happening.
Yes.
Right. Do the opposite of what the instinct wants you to do.
Yes.
Which is like fight it or whatever.
Fight it. Yeah.
Just be like, yes, this is where I am.
Yep.
And it's okay.
And this is what the whole thing is like.
Yeah.
Right. Like it is the nature of the craft is to take chances, and they don't work, and you feel crappy and they don't work.
Yeah.
And it's like supposed to happen. This is part of the sport.
That's so critical. The concept of embracing these issues,
it is,
and looking at them from a different lens, like a PMA, positive mental attitude,
mm-hmm.
right? Or there's other forms of this out there where instead of resisting everything, you just let it in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And then you just say, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that happened.
Yeah.
Right. There's a Jocko Willink. I talk about him a lot. He's a podcaster. He's also runs like leadership training.
Okay. Yep.
Business and leadership training. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, so he has a very different approach.
Yes.
It's very military based fundamentals, but applied to businesses. And I've said this a few times on the podcast, but one of my favorite things that he says is good. If something bad happens to you, good.
Yep.
You learned something. New information came in.
Yeah.
You are 100 miles into this race and you're bonking out or whatever. Good. You learned that the way you're eating isn't working.
Yeah, totally. And you get an opportunity to meet that part of yourself.
Yep.
And work and get to know it and work with it. And it's funny. I this week I'm here for NAU cross country preseason.
Right.
And we did a workshop on the hero's journey this week. And I asked one of the athletes, Allie Upshaw, she's from the Navajo Nation. And because the hero's journey is a kind of this universal thing, I was pretty sure there must be a story from the Navajo.
In the Dene culture. Yeah.
That follows the Navajo, the hero's journey story. And she told a story. And part of that story was that these certain characters within Navajo mythology had the opportunity to like vanquish anger, jealousy. I remember anger and jealousy. I don't remember all of them. There was like 5 what we would normally call negative emotions.
Yeah.
They had the opportunity to vanquish once and for all humanity these negative emotions.
Okay.
And actually either they or like whatever power was larger was like, no, don't vanquish those. Those are there for our teaching. We like our people need them for our teaching.
Totally.
And I was like, oh, that's great. When she said that, it's just, we get to meet those sides of ourselves.
Yeah. And embrace those. And I have a note here that pre-race nerves, if you're nervous before a race, I say good.
Yes.
It means you care about that
Yeah,
race,
for sure.
right?
Yep.
Like embrace that just the same. Like it's not, or when you're doing public speaking, or the first few times I did this podcast, it was like I was nervous and I was like, good, it's because it matters to me.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
And so I that's such a huge takeaway. And something I think we can practice both in life and in sport.
Yeah.
Like in life for sure.
Yep.
like way more than in sport probably.
Yeah.
Like bring it on. Good. I'm glad this is happening, right?
Yep.
So hypothetically, I have a situation for you. It's 3 weeks from now. I'm at mile 60 of my 100 mile race.
Yes.
Okay. Foot race. I have not done the proper amount of preventative visualization and planning that I
Yes.
should have done.
You and every other athlete.
And and I'm hobbled over, crumpled over, can't eat. It's getting dark, and I'm feeling really lonely.
Yeah.
Is there an emergency technique or tip or tool that you have that I could pull out in that moment to get me through the next bit?
So you added can't eat, which is a tough one, because it's funny from the mental emotional standpoint. Probably one thing that we don't talk about enough is like enough food and the right food and like sleep and stuff like that, you know? So a go-to a lot of times, like I catch it in myself and with athletes I work with, is be like, just like look after your body really well, you know? But you added can't eat to
self-care.
this.
Yeah, self-care.
Yeah, you added can't eat to this. So yeah.
Which I don't really have a problem with, but I know a lot of people do.
Totally.
They struggle with keeping calories down after in 6+ hour events.
Yep. And odds are, if you're in that situation, like you got to get to the next aid station, because you can't eat, but you probably also don't have a means of really telling somebody you're in trouble. If you're actually in trouble. Maybe we're not talking about you're actually in trouble. It just sucks. Are we talking about it just sucks?
No, yeah, I'm not in like hit the spot tracker, I need an emergency evacuation mode.
Yeah. It's just
I'm talking sucks. Like I'm in the depths of the demons of like, why am I doing this? What, like, should I pull out right now? Like, what the heck is my problem? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why did I decide to do this?
I think in those moments, it's so hard to think constructively. You know, and it's so hard to feel differently because you are so depleted and it's got a whole storm cloud of weather all over you, right? Honestly, this is where I think like AA has it figured. And what I mean by that is that there's a phrase that I think comes from AA, which is like, just do the next right thing. I think it comes from there.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it just is just like, make your world real small and be like, all right, I'm going to get to that tree. And then, or maybe I'm going to look at my watch. I'm just going to focus on getting through this mile. Make it smaller. Make them Ks. I'm going to get through this K. You know what I mean? And I'm just literally going to get through this K, and that's all I'm going to think about. And I'm going to get through the next K. I'm going to get through the next K.
Right.
I think it's a bit of a big ask to ask someone to do like a big transformation of a person, you know, like make them feel good or feel grateful or whatever. Someone might, if what I'm anticipating is you have like next to nothing left and you're just trying to like get to the next station before you make a decision about like the next step in this race. So yeah, just being realistic about what someone's state is like. It's just make the task really small.
Chunk it.
Yeah, chunk it and make it really small. But you know what's really cool? Something that I've noticed in my own, like working with my own weather is sometimes we just stop fighting with like whatever's going on and we just get present in something really small, like literally I'm gonna like this K or I'm just gonna stop and like notice the trees, and I'm just gonna like notice the trees and my feet on the ground for a little while.
Yeah.
Something that helps you feel better will come to you. It comes through you. I think we often try to work towards, we think and think and think. We try to find that thing. We kind of try to find that lens, or we try to find that perspective, or we try to tell ourselves something that's going to change how we feel. We get like working in our brain. And I think oftentimes if we could just stop the working in our brain and we get our attention on something in the now, it'll actually come to you, but we're blocking it because we're like so working so hard and talking so much in our brain. So yeah, if you're out there in that 100 mile and it's 60 miles in and you're like, oh, this sucks, I'd say like focus on the next mile or the next corner and be like, what's it feel like how do my feet feel in contact with the trail to that place? How does the darkness feel around me? Where do I feel this emotion in my body? Like anything that will draw you to something in the now, and that like where you're not trying to like construct something new in your brain, because usually at that point your brain's not going to help you very much.
Right.
I think it's mostly like focus on the now, take something in through your senses, get into the present, and you wouldn't believe what comes sometimes when you like get into the present.
Right. Yeah. So my friend Matt Annabelle, he took the first place on the single speed category on this last race, and he said something that's very interesting. He said, you have to create the cracks so that you can let the light come through.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's so neat. That's a neat way to say that.
And his friend Karen said, yeah, this is the growth place.
Yes.
Right? Like he intentionally was like, I'm going to crack myself because that's the space
Yes.
where the realness comes through, and the like that everything's so raw in that place.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
you fill it in with growth, you know?
And I think this is what's hard. And I like that how you said that.
Yeah.
And this is like something I've been like thinking about lately too in life. And the growth is usually not something that we create. It's something that comes through the crack that's not on it. We didn't orchestrate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like so we almost have to crack. And this is another place where I think AA has it figured. It's hard thing to acknowledge powerlessness, but like that's one huge step in it, right? It's like I'm you would know better than me, but like I'm powerless in this situation. This is where I'm at.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's very much part of ego death. Is I can't change it. I can't control it. I'm gonna let go of trying.
Yeah.
And let life, let the moment, let something else grow through the crack.
Yep.
Because I'm gonna let there be a crack, as opposed to trying to fill it.
Right.
Yep.
Let the universe fill it.
Let the universe
Right.
fill it. Yep.
That's I think that's why I do these things, you know.
Yeah.
And back to something we were talking about before about the ego. You know, I found an interesting calmness when I started this podcast specifically, and I created a tribe outside of the actual event.
Yeah. Cool.
When I created those connections, like, oh, I'm gonna do this event, but I'm also gonna interview these people afterwards or before.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have become my friends now. So I've created this social group around racing, but it kind of alleviated the pressure of the having to have that social status in the race itself.
Totally, because you have a different social status.
Right.
Yes. Totally.
Right.
Yep.
So I just moved the thing to something a little more casual.
Yep.
That created a lot less pain
Yeah.
to create the social status.
Totally.
Right. And kind of I just kind of like realized that as you were saying that. So it was a technique, I guess, a technique that I did. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but, cause now I'm like Dylan with the podcast studio,
Yeah.
right? Instead of like Dylan wanting to be top whatever in the race.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't
Yeah.
even matter. So I was free to just race my own race.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because like I had this other thing over here. That
Yes.
afterwards I'll go be that guy over there. Right?
Yeah.
So it's working for me, you know, and I'm actually finding that the connections through this are way stronger than the competitive connections.
So neat.
Those are weird. The competitive connections, you know, like
Yeah.
the type of relationships that are formed in like deep competition like that.
Yeah.
They're not the same.
No. Well, you know, it's interesting you say that. You bring to my mind. So there's this, it gets a bit back to Hero's Journey, but there's a writer, his name is Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest, actually.
Okay.
But he's like that. His whole thing, he's extremely inclusive. Like he's got a very wide lens on what he thinks truth is, and it's inclusive and so on. He wrote this book called Falling Upward.
Okay.
And he talks about the first half of life and the second half of life. And this is, and he basically says that the first half of life, and I think he's an extremely wise guy, but I think he's translating some very age-old wisdom here too, in like what he's describing. It aligns with the hero's journey, and he's basically saying like first half of life, we actually kind of need our ego to like construct an identity and construct a life and like make kind of like create the shape of our life in the world. So maybe for you, like it started out as like I'm going to be an athlete and I'm going to be, you know, train and be competitive in this sport. But then he says usually what happens is something happens to us, kind of leaves us a little bit disillusioned with the original construction, like the original kind of identity and ego, and that can get a little bit broken. But when that happens, it can be painful and confusing for a little bit. But when that happens, you actually discover what you're really doing in that world, like what you're really doing on that path. So I guess I kind of wonder for you, if you kind of got your first half of life in this sense through sport was as an athlete, but then maybe there's like, man, it's painful and this doesn't quite fit for me. But then it came to you, hey, I'm going to do this podcast, and maybe what you're actually doing, which is like bringing out who you actually are, is to actually connect with this population in a different way. But it may not happen without the pain of the, like there may be some pain in the transition, like a little bit of disillusionment in the transition. And so then your second half of life is actually like living out who you authentically are. So you say you create an identity, and that's part of it, right? But it's probably a whole lot of authenticity too. Yeah. Like you're able to be who you are more in this space.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it also feels like I had a obligation to freely share information about in and around the sport.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I felt like many people taught me a lot of things on my come up into the sport and gave me just free information.
Yep.
And so I felt like I have the skills and I have the ability to do this. And so let's gather these people around and put the information on the internet, and hopefully it'll help other people.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So it was almost like a deep way of contributing back to the tribe of people.
Yeah. You know,
yep. Like full circle.
Totally. That's the hero's journey, actually.
Okay.
Is to go through something hard, change as a person, have some realizations you didn't have before, and then want to give those back. That's like the full circle.
Really?
Yeah.
Wild. That's so wild.
It is.
Yeah. Well, in the end part of that is like I'm at a point in my life where I was deeply feeling this sense that I needed to contribute back somehow.
Cool. That's cool.
In one way or the other, right?
Yep.
You know, at work kind of topped out, not really contributing as much as I used to, or at least feeling like I was contributing as much as I used to there.
Yeah.
And I guess going through a somewhat of like a early midlife crisis, you could say, where I kind of was like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
And then constructed this thing around that, and very satisfying. And when you get people that tell you like, this guest or that guest really helped me out, I'm having the same problem.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying.
Totally.
You know, to be like, well, I'm the vessel for this.
Totally.
You know?
Yep.
So that's kind of where it's at now. So what's the end of the hero's journey after
You know
that?
what? It goes on and on. Life is supposedly a series of heroes' journeys.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know what's fun is you'll look at movies, like most movies are actually built around the framework of the hero's journey.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. You look at Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter.
Is that purposely or subconsciously with a lot of these writers?
I bet it's sometimes subconscious and sometimes purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think some writers are very aware of this path in life, so they want to write a story around it. And I bet you some people would say other people construct it subconsciously.
Because it's a natural kind of arc for folks.
Yep. But it's funny, like you see, like one of my favorite movies is Interstellar. And right, such an awesome movie.
Oh, it's amazing.
And he leaves like it's all the stages. You leave home, you cross this threshold, you go through tons and tons of hardship, you suffer like real crushing things. Like his daughter his daughter thought he left for a long time, and he was trying to come back. But then at the end of he goes into the wormhole, the darkness to find the singularity. You find your soul. Just to find your soul on the hero's journey.
Okay.
Yep.
Whoa.
And then you bring it back. You'll never watch that. This movie will never be the same again. You bring it back and you do something generative for like the whole. And then you go off on another journey. And you remember at the end of Interstellar, he goes off to find his buddy, right? Yeah. So we're always leaving. We're like, if we're living a good life, we're always heading out on a hero's journey or coming back from one or yeah, we're supposed to keep leaving home.
This is so fascinating. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. So you do online sessions, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you're currently.
Yep.
You currently have those available.
Yep.
I just saw on your Instagram you have a level 1 and a level 2 weekly online focus sessions comoming up in the fall. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yep. So those are so those evolve. So what those are, they're kind of 20 to 30 minute online sessions. They go for 13 weeks this fall, and there'll be another set in the spring too. They go a little longer.
Okay.
And the level 1 is like much more like I'd say sports psych basics, like we talk about who do you want to be, how do you want to see, what are you going to do, which is kind of the platform that I build a lot of my work on.
Yeah.
And then we talk about visualization, and we talk about pain, we talk about fear, and we talk about much more like basic sports psych stuff with a lot of actionable practices that people can apply right away.
Yeah.
So I usually encourage, if someone's looking for mental skills for their sport, and it's running focused, but it's overlaps so much, right, with like any endurance sport.
Yeah.
I'd say that's a good place to start. It'll probably have a little bit of a cross country lens on it because we're heading into cross country season.
Yeah.
But what I usually do when I jump on is I just ask, like, who are all of you who are on the call? And so I'll try to expand my examples to include like like bike racers, or, you know, if I have those kind of athletes in my session. So
Yeah.
that's the level 1. It's on Tuesday nights. The live sessions are on Tuesday nights, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and then everything, you know, after that they go for 20 to 30 minutes. And then the level 2 is way more what do I call it? I call it perspective. So the first session I call practices, because you learn a lot of like methods. The second course, level 2, is perspectives. So it's much more just talking about like how our human brain works, how that relates to the body, how that relates to performance, a lot more like understanding of the person. So I always say that one's well suited to somebody who's like deeply invested in their sport, who wants to have a long-term relationship with it. I think it really goes a long way toward like self-understanding.
Yeah.
And self-understanding is such at the heart of anything with sports psychology, because so much of it is just understanding why you feel the way you feel, or why you react the way you react. Which helps us cope and helps us focus. So that second course is much more perspectives focused, like understanding the athlete.
Yeah.
More mature course too. Like the first one, I'll have middle school through high school, and every so often I'll have high school in the second one. But level 2 is a bit more of a mature lens
Right.
on it.
Okay. Excellent. And have you written a book yet?
Not yet. I'm working on one.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping I might have like a good solid draft done for this fall. There's not a chance. Next fall, I hope to have something done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I heard on the last pod a year or so ago, you were kind of winding up for one.
Probably a year ago, I said I'm gonna have it ready in a year.
I don't know. But I won't hold you on that.
It is going forward. It's just not going forward fast. That's
Yeah. Well, I think I have no idea what it's like to write a book, but I'm sure it's complicated.
It is. It's proving to be. It's proving to be.
So, all right. Cool. Well, let's wrap this up.
Sure.
So I just thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
being open. I kind of randomly contacted you out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
I went to Hypo 2 to get some work done there, and then and then I was looking around on the internet or on the website, and I saw your name come up, and you had a page on there, and I was like, she's very interesting.
Oh, thanks. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and just everything you're doing, you're such a positive light, and
Thanks.
I'm sure you've influenced and helped so many people, and you're just freely. I got amped on my mic. Your positivity and just freely giving out this information is just so important to people, to help people in their sport.
Oh, well,
so,
thank you. I just feel so grateful to have a job I love, and I love talking about it and sharing stuff back. So thanks so much for asking me.
Yeah. So thank you, and we'll catch up with you maybe in a year, and we'll see how your book's going. Okay.
Darn thing has to get done. Yeah, I really want it to be done in a year.
All right, Shannon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
right.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to let you know a few different ways that you can support this podcast. Of course, you can like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Tell other people about it. Tell your friends and family. If you think these conversations I'm having are valuable as I think they are, share it. Send it out. Ask them to subscribe. That would be amazing. That's a free way that you can support. Another way you can support is by financially support is by becoming a member on either YouTube or Spotify. Those links are always in the description of all the videos. And YouTube members do get some extra perks like member shoutouts during the podcast, priority reply to comments, and best of all, you get early access to new videos that I'm releasing. You can also, if you don't want to sign up for a recurring membership, You can also show me your support by sending a one-time gift using what YouTube calls the Super Thanks feature. So when you're watching a video, down at the bottom, there's the little buttons, the thumbs up, thumbs down button. And right next to that, there is a heart with a little dollar sign in the middle, and it says thanks next to it. That is the Super Thanks button. So if you click that, it'll allow you to give a one-time gift, financial gift of your choice. And it's just incredible. Like, seeing the support that I've gotten so far from both members and from Super Thanks is just amazing, and it is definitely allowing me to keep this thing rolling down the tracks.